You know, we are constantly warned that globalization is this giant monster coming to steal your job. I mean, you hear it in basically every political debate. You read it in every think piece about the modern economy.
Right. The narrative is incredibly consistent.
Yeah, it's always the same story. Some factory across the ocean is going to figure out how to do exactly what you do, but for pennies on the dollar. And then one day, you're going to walk into your office, your boss is going to hand you an empty cardboard box, and you're just out on the street.
It's a very clean binary fear. I mean, you are either employed or you are unemployed.
Exactly. We like things to be visible like that. We
Yeah.
like the threat to be obvious. Because if the threat is just, losing your job, you know exactly how to fight it. You upskill, you work harder, you make yourself indispensable.
But the reality is so much more complicated.
Which is why we are doing this deep dive today.
Yeah.
Because we are looking at this massive, really massive stack of research today. It's a 30-year microscopic tracking of the global workforce. And it proves that the exact opposite is true.
Yeah, the real threat is absolutely not that you lose your job to offshoring.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The real exhausting, honestly terrifying threat is that you are forced to keep it.
That is the ultimate twist in the data right there. I mean, the end game of your modern office life, the reason you feel so completely burned out by like 2.0 p.m. on a Tuesday, well, it was actually written 3 decades ago.
Yeah, you were allowed to keep your job title. Congratulations. But the actual meat of your job.
The daily, hourly reality of what you actually do with your brain in your hand.
Right, that was secretly mutated. You've basically been systematically turned into this hyper-stressed, multitasking Superman.
And the crazy part is, most of us didn't even realize it was happening.
No, you just thought you were bad at time management. You sit there thinking, oh, if I could just find the right productivity app, if I could just get to inbox 0, I wouldn't feel like I'm drowning all the time.
But you aren't fighting a cluttered inbox. You are fighting a 30-year macroeconomic tide.
Exactly. You're fighting this massive structural shift that fundamentally rewired what it even means to work. And to prove this, we aren't going to sit here and look at vague economic theories.
No, we are looking at a literal masterpiece of empirical data. This is a study by researchers Sascha O, Becker and Marc-Andreas Muendler. It's published by the National Bureau of Economic Research.
And this is the core mission of today's deep dive. We're going to use their microscope to show you exactly what happened to your life. Because, how do you actually prove that white-collar jobs are being secretly eaten alive from the inside out? You can't just look at employment rates.
Right, because employment rates just tell you if a physical body is sitting in a chair.
Yeah.
They don't tell you what the brain inside that body is enduring. To figure that out, we have to look at Germany.
And Germany is just the absolute perfect test subject for this. They are a massive export powerhouse. They have deep integration into global supply chains. And crucially, they keep incredibly meticulous records.
They really do. So this research uses the German Qualifications and Career Survey. Economists usually call it the BIBB data. And the sheer scale of this source data is, well, it's hard to wrap your head around. They tracked a highly representative sample of the workforce. We're talking roughly 0.1% of the entire German labor force.
But they didn't just do a quick survey and walk away. They tracked them over 30 years, from 1979 all the way to 2006.
Exactly. 5 distinct, massive survey waves.
Yeah.
1979, 1986, 1992, 1999, and 2006. But here is the genius part. Here is where Becker and Muendler completely separated themselves from every other economist looking at trade. They knew that asking people for their job title is completely useless.
Oh, because job titles lie all the time. Think about a marketing manager in 1979. They're sitting at a desk with a rotary phone, a Rolodex, maybe a physical filing cabinet.
Right.
But a marketing manager in 2006, or even today, they're running social media algorithms, managing remote freelance teams across 3 different time zones, integrating CRM software. The title is completely identical. But the job is a completely different species.
Precisely. So the researchers bypassed the titles entirely. They went straight to the source and asked the workers something far more granular. They essentially asked, what exactly are your physical and mental actions at 10:00 a.m. on a Tuesday?
They tracked the actual microscopic tasks, not the job title, the literal actions.
Yeah, they extracted 15 longitudinally consistent activity indicators. They basically wanted to know the specific verbs of a person's day. Things like produce goods, repair, organize, consult, analyze. They wanted to measure what you were doing with your hands and your prefrontal cortex every single hour.
Okay, so to understand why the modern worker is so exhausted today, we have to use this 30-year microscope to destroy some massive lies we've all been told about the global economy. Let's start by looking at the timeline, because I think, everyone assumes this is a very recent problem.
Oh, the Globalization 2.0 time war. This is where the data just starts breaking common sense in half.
Right. So think about the narrative we are fed. You read the news, you hear the politicians on the debate stage. The story is always that globalization, specifically the act of a company importing intermediate parts from across the globe to build a final product, is a brand new, modern phenomenon. It's the story of the 2000s, it's the internet age, it's advanced supply chain management.
That is the story, yeah. And the data from 1978 proves it is totally fundamentally false.
Walk us through 1978, because in my head, 1978 is analog, it's local factories, it's way before the personal computer revolution.
Well, in 1978, intermediate parts, and by that I mean the components, the raw materials, the half-finished goods that a company buys to build its final product, those made up 65.8% of total imports in Germany.
Wait, almost 66%.
Yes.
More than 2/3 of everything coming into the country in 1978 was just parts to build other things.
Way before the internet, way before modern logistics algorithms. The global supply chain was already a massive, deeply entrenched machine. Now let's fast forward to 2006. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, after China joins the WTO, after the massive tech boom, guess what that percentage of intermediate imports is?
Well, logically, if the narrative is true, it has to have skyrocketed. It should be like 80 or 90%. I mean, we offshore everything now, right?
It dropped. It fell to
It
56.3%.
went down by almost 10 points.
It went down. And it didn't just crash overnight either. It was a slow, steady slide backward. It went down to 63.5% in 1986, then 59.1% in 1992, all the way down to 56.3% in 2006.
That is wild. So the narrative of the modern supply chain suddenly exploding out of nowhere and devouring everything in the 21st century, it's a myth. Globalization 2.0 happened way earlier than we think.
We are actually moving backward in terms of intermediate import ratios. Final goods trade, so trading fully finished products, is actually growing faster than trading the parts to build them. The monster of the global supply chain was already fully grown, fully operational, and eating local manufacturing long before anyone had an email address.
Wow. Okay, but if we're moving backward on importing parts, it feels like companies must be bringing manufacturing back in-house. Like, are these corporations actually shrinking their global footprint? Because you hear this phrase all the time, the hollowed out corporation. The idea that modern companies don't actually make anything anymore. They're just like empty legal shells that offshore 100% of their operations. Apple doesn't build the iPhone, Foxconn does. Is the data hiding something else here?
Prepare for the next major shock to the system, because the total outsourcing rate of the economy hasn't moved an inch.
Not an inch. You're telling me over 30 years of hypercapitalism, the actual boundary of what a corporation keeps in-house didn't change.
It is a terrifyingly flat line. The researchers looked at the share of total intermediate inputs as a percentage of the total production value. In 1978, it was exactly 51.0%.
Okay, so a company makes a product. Half of the value is generated internally by their own employees, and half of the value is bought from an external supplier.
Exactly. Half in-house, half outsourced. Now let's jump to 2006. 30 years of relentless corporate restructuring, global consulting firms telling everyone to cut costs, the invention of offshore tax havens. What is the outsourcing rate?
You said it's flat, so...
It is 51.2%.
That's impossible. The boundary of the firm changed by 0.2% over 3 decades. How is that structurally possible with all the chaos we've lived through?
Because the total volume of external dependency didn't change. The total pie of outsourced work is fixed. Let's use an analogy here, because it's really the only way to conceptualize this flat line.
Okay, let's do a family budget. You look at a middle-class family in 1978. They look at their total food budget for the month. They decide they're going to spend exactly 50% of their money buying groceries and cooking in their own kitchen. The other 50% of the budget goes to ordering takeout.
Perfect. Half internal production, half external sourcing.
Right. Now you look at that exact same family 30 years later in 2006. Their kitchen has better appliances, they have smartphones to order food, but when you look at their bank statements, they are still spending exactly 50% of their money on takeout and 50% on groceries. The total volume of their external dependency hasn't changed a single bit.
The size of the pie is identical.
So why the panic? Why does every single white-collar worker feel like their job is constantly on the chopping block today? If the pie isn't changing size, if companies are outsourcing the exact same percentage of work they were in the disco era, what is the problem?
Because of the ultimate betrayal of the supply chain. The truth isn't in the size of the pie. The truth is in the structure of who gets to bake it.
Ah, the slices changed hands.
Violently. The total outsourcing rate stayed at 51%. But domestic sourcing got brutally swapped for foreign sourcing. If you look inside that 51%, the share of foreign-made inputs shot up. It went from 14.3% to 21.7%. That is a massive 50% relative increase in foreign dependency.
So going back to the family, they are still ordering the exact same amount of takeout. But in 1978, they bought that takeout from the local diner down the street. They supported their neighbor.
But in 2006, they stopped calling the local diner. They found a way to order that exact same takeout from a cheaper kitchen across the ocean.
The local neighbor lost the contract. The foreign factory won it. The monster of outsourcing didn't grow any larger. It just turned its appetite away from your local zip code and focused entirely on a cheaper labor market abroad.
That's the exact mechanism. It is a structural reassignment. The border of the firms, that 51% line, stayed rigidly the same, but the border of the nation was completely breached.
Okay, I see the macro picture here, but we need to connect this to the listener. How does a factory moving from Munich to Mumbai or from Chicago to Shenzhen actually affect a spreadsheet warrior sitting in a cubicle? If I'm an accountant or a marketing director or an HR specialist, I'm not building car parts. Why does this foreign sourcing shift ruin my day?
Because we aren't trading boxes anymore.
What do you mean?
To understand your modern office job, we have to completely throw away old-school economics. If you took Econ 101 in college, you read David Ricardo. You learned the classic theory of comparative advantage.
Right. The old textbooks always use the exact same example. Portugal trades wine for English cloth. It's neat. It's tidy. Portugal is sunny, so they make wine. England has sheep, so they make cloth. Goods for goods.
It's a beautiful theory. And it completely fails to explain the modern world. You cannot use wine and cloth to understand why a software developer in San Francisco is having a panic attack on a Thursday afternoon.
So what replaced it? What's the new model?
A monumental shift in economic understanding called the Grossman-Rossi-Hansberg Revolution. In 2008, these economists formalized what everyone was feeling but couldn't quite articulate. They proved that we no longer trade finished products. We trade tasks.
We trade tasks. We don't export cars. We export the act of doing something.
Exactly. The entire production line has been taken out back and sliced into microscopic slivers. You don't just build a car and put it on a boat. You export the design of the car's aerodynamics to a lab in Italy. You import the assembly of the axle from Mexico. You offshore the payroll, accounting for the entire global operation, to the Philippines.
You literally slice a single business process into 100 different geographic pieces.
And then capital sorts those pieces ruthlessly. The specific tasks that can be boxed up, digitized, codified, or written into a step-by-step manual, those are ripped out of the domestic office and shipped globally to wherever labor is absolutely cheapest.
And the tasks that can't be boxed up?
They're left right on your desk. You are the onshore survivor. You are the one left holding the pieces that couldn't be emailed away.
Okay, this logic leads to one of the most anti-common sense scenarios in the entire global economy. It completely breaks what we were told about higher education. Alan Blinder's theory.
Oh, the education trap.
Yeah.
This is where people's assumptions really get destroyed.
I want to pose a scenario to the listener right now. Let's play a little game of globalization survival. Who has better job security against the modern supply chain? Option A, a high school dropout who works as a janitor, sweeping floors in a downtown office building. Option B, an Ivy League educated radiologist reading complex medical x-rays and MRI scans.
If you ask a politician or a high school guidance counselor, they will tell you the radiologist is invincible. They have degrees, they have a highly specialized knowledge. The janitor is completely replaceable.
But in the task trade economy, the Grossman-Rossi-Hansberg reality,
The janitor wins, hands down.
the guy with the broom has more job security than the doctor.
Why? Because offshore ability has absolutely nothing to do with how smart you are. It has nothing to do with your education level or your prestige or your salary. It is entirely about the physical reality of the specific task.
The physical anchor.
Think about the radiologist. What is their actual task? They look at a digital screen, they interpret visual data, they type a report. That task is entirely digital. It has no physical anchor, which means that X-ray can be digitized, sent via a secure network to a highly trained English-speaking doctor in India, read while the American patient is asleep, and sent back before morning for a tenth of the cost.
The Ivy League degree cannot stop an email attachment. If the task is digital, it can travel at the speed of light.
But look at the janitor. The floor is physically dirty in a specific building in Chicago. You cannot sweep a floor in Chicago from a computer in Mumbai. You cannot clean a physical toilet over Zoom. The janitor is geographically bound to the building. The task requires physical, tactile contact. Proximity is mandatory.
So this lie we were all told, just go to college, get a white-collar job, work with your brain instead of your hands, and you'll be safe from the global economy, was actually terrible advice.
It was the exact wrong advice for avoiding globalization. Your degree is useless against task slicing. The physical, non-routine reality of your daily tasks is your only actual armor.
Okay, this brings us to the absolute core of this deep dive. If all the easy, codifiable digital tasks are stripped away, sliced up, and shipped abroad, what exactly is left for the domestic worker to do? What does the surviving job actually look like?
It looks like an exhausted Superman.
I really want the listener to internalize this next part. Think about your workday tomorrow. Think about your calendar. Why do you feel like you are doing the jobs of 3 different people? Why are you constantly context switching until your brain feels like, just static?
Because you literally are doing the jobs of multiple people.
Unleash the core stat here. What did the researchers find when they tracked the German workers' daily tasks from 1979 to 2006?
Let's set the baseline first. We go back to 1979. We look at the average German worker. How many simultaneous, distinct tasks did they perform on a daily basis? In 1979, the average worker did 1.67 tasks.
Less than 2 tasks.
A massive 58.7% of workers, so nearly 60% of the entire labor force, essentially did just one thing, 0, or one main activity.
I'm trying to picture my own office today, and I literally don't know a single person who only does one task. But in 1979, this was the norm. You went to work, you pulled a lever on a machine, or you're an accountant, and you just filed ledgers, you made a sales call, you did your one thing, and then you went home at 5:00 p.m.
The baseline was simple. The boundaries of the job were incredibly clear. Now, fast forward to 2006, 30 years of task trade globalization. 30 years of the easy single task being boxed up and sent to foreign factories. How many people just do one thing anymore?
Did the single task job just go completely extinct? What's the number?
2.4%.
From almost 60% down to 2%? That's a total wipeout.
The single task job was utterly eradicated. It practically does not exist in the modern economy. By 2006, the average worker wasn't doing 1.67 tasks. They were juggling 7.24 tasks simultaneously.
7.24 tasks. This is the modern reality. You don't just file the document. You file the document, you troubleshoot the proprietary software because IT is understaffed, you manage the client relationship on a video call, you run the new HR compliance module, you draft the quarterly strategy deck, and you analyze the competitors' social media metrics.
You're doing 7 completely distinct jobs.
And here's the tragic part. We internalize this. You think it's your fault. You think you are multitasking because you are an overachiever trying to get a promotion, or you think you're just failing to keep up with a normal workload.
You aren't. You are multitasking because the simple, repetitive baseline of your job was amputated. The easy, meditative part of your workday, the part where you just put your head down and do one thing for 3 hours, was boxed up and sent overseas because it was cheap to offshore.
The foreign factory took the simple stuff.
And you are the onshore survivor. You were left behind to pick up all the complex, messy, non-routine, heavily communicative pieces that couldn't be put on a boat. You have to stitch the remaining pieces together.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't this what we wanted? Is it really a bad thing that we don't do repetitive, mindless work anymore? We're all managers now. We're knowledge workers. On paper, this sounds like an upgrade. We moved up the value chain.
You're touching on the high-end illusion. Economists actually have a very positive-sounding term for this. They call it industrial upgrading. And when you look at the macro data lines, it looks like a triumph. Look at the 15 task categories over 30 years. Everything labeled produce goods, the actual physical making of things, it plummets. It falls off a cliff.
We stopped getting our hands dirty. We traded heavy machinery for ergonomic office chairs.
But look at what skyrockets to replace it. Everything labeled organize, plan, analyze, research, and consult. These shoot straight up into the stratosphere.
So we traded calluses on our hands for endless, mind-numbing meetings. We traded factory floors for slide decks, synchronization calls, and planning sessions.
The economist says, look, everyone is doing high-end cognitive work.
But the worker says, I am drowning in coordination. It doesn't feel like an upgrade. It feels like chaos, because coordination friction is exhausting.
Exactly. You are constantly managing the friction between the fragmented parts of the job. You are the human glue trying to connect the work kept here with the work sent to a factory 8,000 miles away.
Okay, but surely this massive shift from producing to coordinating is just because the old industry has died, right? This is the dying industry fallacy. People think, oh, the local steel mill shut down and a tech startup opened across town, the factory worker lost their job and a software manager got hired. That's why the tasks changed. It's just different companies.
That is what everyone assumes, and that is exactly why this Becker and Muendler study is so devastating, because the researchers controlled for that.
Explain how they controlled for it. What does that mean in human terms?
In their regression models, they held the industry and occupation variables completely fixed. They essentially mathematically filtered out the effect of the steel mill closing and the tech company opening. They wanted to know what happened inside the surviving jobs. If you look at the exact same job title in the exact same industry, did the tasks change?
Inside the identical job.
Yes. And the curve remains completely identical. The mutation towards 7.24 tasks wasn't because old industries died. It happened inside the walls of the companies that survived.
So this is about the accountant at the steel mill.
Precisely. The steel mill didn't close. It just outsourced its basic data entry to a lower-cost country. So the accountant who survived the layoffs wakes up one day. Their basic, quiet number crunching, the thing they actually went to school for, is gone. Now, to justify their salary to the executives, they have to do HR coordination. They have to integrate the new IT software with the foreign vendor. They have to do strategic forecasting for the supply chain.
The mutation happened while they were sitting in the chair. They kept their title, they kept their desk, but they lost their peace of mind. The job was rewritten around them.
And that rewritten job comes with a brutal psychological cost. Which brings us to the Trinity of Doom.
The performance paradox. Because if we're doing all this high-end, independent, cognitive work, why are we so miserable? Why is workplace anxiety at absolute all-time highs? Why is burnout a global epidemic?
Because the shift wasn't just in what we do, it was in how we are judged. The researchers tracked the performance requirements alongside the tasks, and the requirements mutated into a monster.
The expectations changed.
Massively. The data tracks job requirements over the 30 years, and it shows massive spikes in 3 specific areas. We call it the Trinity of Doom. Number 1, deadlines and immense time pressure.
Because you're coordinating with a global supply chain. Everything is due yesterday. If the part from Mexico is late, the design from Italy is delayed, and the client in New York is screaming at you.
Number 2, the constant, unrelenting demand to learn new technology. That specific requirement jumped 15% over the time period.
And we all feel this. The software updates every single week. Your company migrates from Slack to Teams, from Asana to Monday.com, from one proprietary portal to another. You are never allowed to achieve mastery over your tools. You are in a permanent state of novice confusion.
You're constantly learning just to stay afloat. And number 3, the most punishing of all. Zero tolerance for small mistakes. The data shows a massive spike in the financial penalty for errors.
Because the system is so tightly wound, if you drop a single ball while juggling your 7 tasks, the entire global logistics chain hiccups.
There's the Trinity. Immovable deadlines, forced constant learning, and absolutely zero room for error.
This completely shatters the myth of the liberated white-collar worker. The non-routine management job sounds freeing on paper. Oh, I get to be creative, I get to strategize. But in reality, it comes with 0 safety nets. You are juggling 7 tasks under impossible deadlines with technology you barely understand, and if you miss one detail, the whole operation crashes.
You are the exhausted Superman. We are paying the physical and mental price for surviving globalization. We traded physical labor for extreme cognitive load.
Okay. Let's look at the other side of the coin for a minute. If we are keeping all the high-stress, high-coordination, brutal, multitasking work here at home, what exactly are we putting on the boats? What are we importing from the rest of the world?
Let's do an autopsy on an import, the anatomy of modern trade.
Right. When a massive shipping container arrives at the port of Hamburg or the port of Los Angeles and we unbox an imported product, what invisible labor are we actually unpacking?
The researchers performed a brilliant piece of mathematical reverse engineering here. It is called imputed tasks.
Stop there. I need to understand this. How do you mathematically extract a human action from a shipping container full of car parts? What does that math actually look like?
Think of it like a recipe. The researchers look at a box of imported car transmissions coming into Germany from Eastern Europe. They don't just see metal. They look back at the German economy a few years prior, and they ask, when we used to make these specific transmissions ourselves, What were the exact physical actions our domestic workers took to build them?
Ah, they look at the historical task breakdown.
Right. They know that building that transmission historically required 40% machine operation, 20% quality control, 10% repair, and so on. They have the recipe. So they take that old domestic recipe and they map it onto the new imported goods. They impute the tasks, they calculate the ghosts in the machine.
That is brilliant. So they can measure exactly what kind of human labor is hidden inside the global trade flows. And the result. What did they find inside the boxes?
They found that we are aggressively importing produce tasks. We are importing the act of physically making things. But more specifically, mathematically speaking, we are importing boredom.
Importing boredom. We use global trade to buy boredom?
Yes, the data proves it. We use international trade to buy the most mind-numbing, standardized, modular work from other countries. We pay foreign factories to do the repetitive, soul-crushing stuff so our domestic workers don't have to.
Let's talk about the shape of this data because it creates a very specific curve, the inverted U curve.
This is one of the most elegant findings in the entire paper.
Yes.
The researchers graphed the performance requirements of imported goods over time, comparing 1986 to 2006.
And the graph forms an inverted U shape, like a bell curve. Where does that curve peak? What is the absolute highest, most concentrated requirement we import from the rest of the world? Is it innovation? Problem solving?
Not even close. The absolute peak of the curve, the thing we import more than anything else, is precisely at work procedures prescribed in detail.
Work procedures prescribed in detail. That is the clinical definition of a mindless job. Follow the manual. Don't think. Don't deviate. Just do step 1, step 2, repeat for 8 hours.
That is the ultimate imported commodity.
I want to use an analogy here to stretch this out. Let's think about a high-end restaurant kitchen.
I love this analogy.
You run a Michelin star restaurant. You have a master chef. That chef is brilliant, highly paid, and highly stressed. You do not want your master chef spending 4 hours every morning standing in the back room crying over 50 pounds of chopped onions. You don't want them boiling basic pasta.
It's an incredible waste of their high-end talent.
Right. So what do? You outsource it. You buy pre-chopped onions from a bulk supplier. You buy pre-boiled pasta. You import the boring, prescribed, standardized prep work, the work procedures prescribed in detail.
And what does that do to your kitchen?
Well, it frees up your domestic master chef. They don't chop onions anymore. Now they only have to worry about the complex sauce, the delicate plating, coordinating at the timing of a 12-course tasting menu, and screaming at the waiters to get the food out hot.
They're doing the high-end coordination tasks.
Now think about the true cost of this. The imported stuff, the pre-chopped onions, lacks all soul. It lacks all flexibility. It's just raw, prescribed labor. And the domestic chef, they lose their basic knife skills. They never get the meditative downtime of just chopping vegetables. They are forced to operate at 100% maximum cognitive stress 100% of the time. They become the exhausted Superman of the kitchen.
You've just described the exact mental state of the modern white-collar worker.
Okay, flip it around. We know what we import. But if we import the basic stuff, what makes a country like Germany such a massive export powerhouse? What are they selling to the rest of the world to maintain their wealth?
They aren't just selling BMWs or complex factory machines. The data shows what is hidden inside those German exports. And the graph is the exact opposite of the import graph.
We're imputing tasks again, but this time on the stuff leaving the country.
Yes. German exports are heavily packed with 3 specific requirements: high performance, technical adaptability, and strict multitasking.
They are exporting the complex sauce.
They are exporting the rules. They are selling highly coordinated, high-stress management and design tasks to the rest of the world. When a foreign country buys a German industrial machine, they aren't just buying metal and wires. They are buying the intense 7-task coordination, the R&D, and the hyper-stress planning that went into designing that machine.
We import the sweat and we export the stress. We import the boredom and we export the complexity.
That is the true modern trade balance right there.
So we know the nature of work has been violently rewritten. The single-task job is dead and buried. The 7.24 multitasking monster has taken over. We import chopped onions. We export complex engineering. But who is the real villain behind this? Who do we blame for the fact that we are all so burned out?
You need to do a scapegoat check, because people want a villain.
Always. When people get fired or when they burn out from juggling Jira, Slack, and HR compliance all day, they point fingers. They blame the robots. The computer took my job. Or they blame immigrants. They're coming across the border and driving down wages. Or they blame trade. Are any of them actually right?
The researchers wanted to settle this debate definitively. So they built massive, complex regression models. They took all the task mutations, the shift from 1.67 to 7.24 tasks, the rise of coordination, the death of single task producing, and they threw all the usual suspects into the mathematical arena to see who would win.
They tested the villains against each other.
They threw in computer usage at the workplace. They threw in the education levels of the workers. They threw in immigration status. And they threw in globalization, the actual trade flows of imports and exports.
And what caused the mutation? When the dust settled, who was holding the smoking gun?
Trade flows. Globalization absolutely dominated the model.
Wait, computers didn't cause the multitasking explosion. I stare at a screen all day long. My software constantly forces me to do new things. You're telling me tech isn't the main driver?
Tech matters. Education matters. The study acknowledges they have an impact. But when you control for the fixed effects of the industry and the occupation, the marginal predictive power of trade flows is supreme. The sheer, overwhelming gravity of global trade is the dominant force tearing up and remaking your job description.
It's a massive cognitive dissonance. We sit in our offices, we stare at our freezing laptops, we get annoyed at our email clients, and we blame the software for our stress. But the real ghost in the machine, the thing actually forcing us to do 7 jobs at once, is the cargo ship crossing the Pacific.
The cargo ship is rewriting your job description faster than the software is.
Okay, so if trade is the villain, we have to talk about why companies offshore these tasks. We have to talk about the capitalist sweatshop myth.
This is the biggest shock of the entire deep dive. This piece of data breaks almost every political narrative we have. Prepare yourself.
The common sense assumption goes like this. Evil, greedy corporations offshore tasks because they hate unions. They hate high welfare states that force them to pay health care. They hate minimum wage laws. So they fire the domestic accountant and offshore the data entry because they want to exploit unregulated, unprotected foreign labor in a sweatshop.
Right. That is the narrative on basically both sides of the aisle.
It is entirely statistically wrong.
No way. That's the whole reason offshoring exists.
The researchers tested this exact theory. They looked at the destination countries where Germany was sending its outsourced tasks, and they rigorously measured the local labor laws in those foreign receiving countries.
Using what metrics? How do you measure a sweatshop versus a welfare state? They used incredibly serious standardized metrics. They used the World Bank's Employment Law Rigidity Index. They measured hiring costs. They measured firing costs. How hard is it to legally fire a worker? They looked at restrictions on work hours. They used IMF data to track minimum wages and unemployment insurance.
So they essentially created 2 buckets. They compared countries with strict labor laws, strong unions, high welfare, and massive worker protections against countries with 0 protections, easy firing, low wages, and brutal hours.
Yes. They compared the worker-friendly nations to the capitalist sweatshop nations.
And then they measured what specific tasks German companies were sending to each bucket.
Yes. And the statistical difference in the task structures sent to high welfare countries versus the task structures sent to low welfare countries is exactly 0.
0? You're kidding.
It is statistically insignificant. When you graph the tasks sent to a highly unionized French worker against the tasks sent to an unprotected worker in a developing nation, the graphs lay perfectly on top of each other.
I need to make sure I really understand this. You were telling me that a multinational corporation does not care if the foreign country has a strong union or no union.
Apple doesn't care.
They don't care about massive firing costs in the receiving country.
Trade is entirely blind to geopolitics. It is blind to local labor laws. It is blind to welfare states.
That shatters the entire political narrative. We are constantly told that companies are fleeing regulations. We are told if we raise taxes or strengthen unions, businesses will flee to unregulated countries.
They aren't fleeing regulations. They are seeking efficiency. The global trade machine is an algorithm, and it only cares about one single variable. Can this specific sliceable task be shipped efficiently? If the answer is yes, it goes. It doesn't matter if it goes to a protected worker in Scandinavia or an unprotected worker in Southeast Asia. The institutional rigidity of the receiving country does not act as a shield, and it does not act as a magnet.
The machine is completely blind. It just eats tasks.
It just sorts them. Codifiable goes away. Complex stays home. Foreign welfare laws do not interrupt the algorithm.
Man. Okay, so if foreign labor laws don't matter, what about domestic unions? Can a strike stop the task mutation at home? If the German workers unionize, will the union save them from the 7.24 task monster?
The answer is yes and no.
Give me the yes first. What does the union actually achieve?
The researchers tracked the unionization rates across different German industries over the 30 years. You had highly organized sectors like steel and transport, and loosely organized sectors like food service. The data shows that sectors with powerful unions absolutely managed to protect the baseline.
The baseline being the produce goods tasks, the physical making of things.
Yes. The unions essentially built a wall around the factory floor. They kept those baseline single-task manufacturing jobs alive longer than in non-union sectors. They saved the titles. They delayed the offshoring of the physical work.
That sounds like a victory, but what is the no part?
The no is that they absolutely failed to slow down the tsunami of high-end task mutation.
They couldn't stop the multitasking explosion.
Not even a little bit. The regressions show that high union sectors experience the exact same violent, stressful shift toward analyzing, organizing, and coordinating as the low union sectors. The curve of the 7.24 tasks is identical, union or no union.
So a union might save your job title, but it cannot stop history.
Exactly. Your boss can't fire you because the union protects your seat. But to justify your continued employment in a globally competitive market, your boss can still hand you 6 new responsibilities. You will still end up doing 7 tasks instead of 2.
The union protects the chair you sit in. It does not protect you from the exhaustion of sitting in it. The mutation happens anyway.
The structural shift is too powerful for a collective bargaining agreement to stop.
Which begs the terrifying question. Is there anything that works? If foreign laws don't matter and domestic unions can't stop the exhaustion, is there anything that gives a worker actual leverage against this blind task-eating machine?
Yes. There's one thing.
The true shield. What is it?
Labor market tightness.
What does that mean in human terms? Break that down.
It means the local unemployment rate. Specifically, the ratio of open job vacancies to unemployed workers in your immediate geographic region.
Supply and demand.
Pure, brutal, localized supply and demand. The data shows that when a local region has a massive labor shortage, when employers are desperate, when there are help-wanted signs in every window, and they simply cannot find warm bodies to fill chairs, the task transformation slows down.
The mutation pauses.
Yes. In highly tight labor markets, the frantic shift from producing to high-stress coordinating happens noticeably slower.
Why? Because the boss is terrified.
Because the boss has absolutely no leverage. The boss knows they cannot find anyone else to replace you. If they try to force you, the surviving accountant, to suddenly juggle 8 tasks instead of 7, or force you to learn 3 new software systems over the weekend, you will simply quit. You'll walk across the street and get a job somewhere else. And they know there is no one in the local talent pool to take your spot.
So the only thing saving you from the multitasking mutation isn't a government law. It isn't a tariff on imported goods. It isn't a strike. It is simply the demographic reality that the company is trapped by a local labor shortage.
Local leverage is the only real leverage against globalization. If the labor market is loose, meaning there is a line of desperate people out the door waiting for a job, the company will violently and rapidly push the global outsourcing. They will amputate the easy tasks, and they will force you into the high-stress, high-coordination mutation instantly.
Because they know you have nowhere else to go. You will swallow the stress. You will accept the 7.24 tasks.
You will accept the exhaustion, because the alternative is the cardboard box.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath. I want to zoom out and look back at this whole journey. 30 years of data. 1979 to 2006. A microscopic tracking of human behavior in the face of a massive macroeconomic shock.
And we survived it. That is the incredible part of all of this. The market didn't collapse. We didn't evolve into mass permanent unemployment. Human adaptability is honestly staggering when you look at it through this lens.
We survived the globalization shock by running away from the factory floor and hiding in the cognitive fortress. We retreated into the high-end tasks, analyzing, organizing, coordinating, planning.
We evolved. We became these multitasking supermen. We built an entirely new white-collar world out of slide decks, CRM software, and endless meetings.
Yeah.
And remarkably, no government had to mandate it. There was no central planning that forced this shift. The market just digested the shock of global trade, and the workers mutated their own daily habits to stay relevant.
It is an incredible testament to human resilience. We figured out a way to make ourselves indispensable by managing the chaos. But this brings us to a terrifying question about the future, the AI paradox.
Are we just repeating history?
I want you to listen to this very closely. Think about everything we just discussed. We spent 30 years building a fortress out of complex, cognitive, multitasking management skills. That was our survival strategy against the cargo ship. We told ourselves, you can put the chopped onions on a boat, you can offshore the data entry, but you can't put my strategic planning on a boat. You can't offshore my ability to organize a team.
We hit in the abstract. We hit in the non-routine.
But look out your window today. Look at artificial intelligence. Look at the large language models that are currently flooding the market. What are they specifically designed to do?
They're designed to analyze, they're designed to organize, to plan, to parse massive amounts of data, to coordinate information.
The exact tasks we retreated into, the exact 7.24 tasks that make up your exhausted day, are now the exact tasks the machines are built to automate.
The cognitive fortress has been breached.
In 1979, the threat was physical distance. The solution was cognitive complexity. But today, the threat is cognitive automation. The cargo ship couldn't take your brain. It could only take your hands. But the algorithm is coming for the coordination.
The rules of offshoreability have fundamentally changed. The Grossman-Rossi-Hansberg theory still applies. We are still trading tasks. But now, the easy codifiable tasks aren't just physical assembly. They are cognitive synthesis.
If the physical work went overseas 30 years ago, and the cognitive coordinating work goes to the algorithm tomorrow, where exactly is the modern worker supposed to retreat to next? You thought keeping your job was the victory. You survived the binary threat. You aren't holding the cardboard box.
But the mutation isn't over. It's just taking a new form.
The muddy waters are only getting deeper. The game of survival is starting all over again. Think about that the next time you open your inbox, check your messages, and see 7 different tasks waiting for you to coordinate.